I'm Jane Matsumoto, and in my normal Monday to Friday life, I'm the culinary curator at JACCC, the Japanese American Cultural and Community Center in Little Tokyo. So that's what I do Monday through Friday. Otherwise, on the weekends, I'm cooking a lot. As a caregiver, you're physically tired for sure. You're challenged with trying to figure out what are you going to feed someone who may not necessarily eat at the same time or eat the same things as you do. I think that preparing meals as a caregiver can be simplified and actually can be enjoyable for caregivers. Hi everyone, today we are going to make meal number one. First of three dishes that we'll make as caregivers, something that can be prepared quickly. Our first meal is going to consist of what the Japanese call their basic ichiju sansai, and that consists of a bowl of rice, soup, a main dish, and some sides. Today's menu starts with miso soup, and our main dish is going to feature salmon, and then a side dish of napa with a medley of fresh mushrooms. So let's get started. I like to use a small pan like this that heats up quickly when I'm making miso soup. Now, I've made this water with a piece of kombu in it, and I just put enough in here for maybe a serving and to have a little bit of extra. Many of the packets that are prepared so that you don't have to worry about it, I have that too. But this one is kombu, and this is katsuo, or it has the fish, bonito fish that Japanese use for all of their basic stocks, or much of their basic stock. And I take this and put it right into the water. Gives it a lot richer, deeper flavor than if you just used water. Now, as this water boils, let's talk a little bit about the miso. You can use any kind of miso, actually. I'm using awase miso today that is half red and half white. Pick one that you think suits your palate. And for this, another tip, so that you don't end up with lumps in your soup, always use something so that you can break up the miso paste. I use about 2 tablespoons, 2.5 tablespoons for a 2-cup size. And this enables you to just really melt the miso without leaving any bumps or lumps. I also like to put, pretty simple, wakame. Now, this is just dehydrated and pre-cut wakame. Many people will try to soak them first. Not necessary. Save yourself trouble. Put it right into the soup. It'll be nice and soft by the time your soup comes to a boil. Actually, this soup is already made. How many minutes did that take us? 1.5 minutes? We'll garnish it with some tofu. Some people like more chunky tofu, other people like more delicate tofu. Cut it to the size you like. We'll take some green onion. Green onion you should always put into the bowl at the end, because that is how you get the most aromatic flavor of the green onion in your soup bowl. And our soup is made, our wakame is made, our tofu's cut, and here we go. Here's our soup bowl. Here's our wakame, nice and opened. I call it bloomed. Garnish it with green onions. So this is the first dish of our ichiju sansai. I'm going to go ahead and cover it and wait to make the next dish. So we're going to make salmon today, and I picked a piece of salmon from Nijiya Market, and it looks very fresh. I have not prepared this with anything. Now today I thought we'll put a little furikake on it. Any kind of neutral oil, and take your favorite furikake. I like this. And this is a aji nori furikake. Because it has a little salt in it, I didn't put a layer of salt. I'm going to just rely on the flavor and the salt from actually the furikake itself. And I'm pretty generous with it. Some of it will come off on the fry pan. So just press it in. Many of you have made furikake, salmon. But this is so simple and it adds so much flavor. And we just leave this like that. While we're doing that, I should have started my pan to get it nice and hot. You see that I'm using a cast iron like this because it's a one-serving pan. And another convenient thing as a caregiver to think about is how much cleanup you're going to have and how many dishes you're going to have to wash after the meal is done. I like this because you can take this directly to the table and you can put a side dish on it, and it doesn't look like you've brought a big fry pan. Saves you time and it looks attractive. So again, although this has a little oil on it, you can put butter or oil, just something to make sure the fish doesn't stick on it. Okay, now you can see the heat's coming off of this fry pan. Just put it right on here. That's all it takes. We just grill it like this. 3-4 minutes per side, depending upon the thickness. It really doesn't require much. Let's flip it. There we go. Nice and brown. And we're going to let it just cook to doneness. So this is pretty simple preparation for the time that you've invested in a delicious meal. As we're cooking this, I was going to mention, some people may wonder, why would you bother, for example, make miso soup when you can get dehydrated miso packs that you just pour hot water into? And for me, the answer is twofold. Number one, many of the prepared packages, in order to have flavor, will have more salt than you would making it from home. And that's, to me, concerning for those, especially if you're caregiving to the elderly or people who have restrictive diets that may require you to be careful about the sodium intake. And quite honestly, it's just simply not the same as a bowl of homemade soup that we made in 5 minutes. Now, this fish is already done. So let's put that on the side. Finish cooking on its own. So we're going to make a medley of a vegetable side dish. And I'm putting a little bit of the same neutral canola oil on the fry pan. And I bought actually a head of napa. And we're going to use it for multiple dishes, but I've cut some here, and we're not going to make it too tiny. Just perfect for a little side dish. Now, you might think, wow, all this mushroom for one meal. We will be using the mushrooms again. My mother happens to like shiitake, fresh shiitake mushrooms so much that I'm going to put 2 in this dish. And I like to cut it up fairly large, but you could cut it as small or as big as you like. We're going to start with the mushrooms. Oh, the smell of fresh mushroom is so good. If you like cooking with sake, as I do, this is where you might add a little extra flavor. You could put salt in it, but I like to add a little flavor with a little tad of sake. Be careful that you don't want to flame this if it's too hot. Look at these wonderful mushrooms. They're nice and plump. The juices are coming out of them. If you're not restricted to salt, you could put a little bit of salt on here. And put our nappa. You don't want to overcook the nappa. And this is done. What I like to do is take this dish and I'm going to put it right onto the side of the salmon. There we go. How easy was that? Look at this wonderful dinner. Here's your meal for your loved one. And how fast was that to prepare? My dad's been gone now for, I can't believe, 6 or 7 years. Many people know that my mother is an ikebana master. My dad used to teach shigin, so I grew up with my parents being quite independent. But when my mom was 90 years old, which was a year ago last August, she took a fall from missing the last step of her porch, and she fractured her pelvis. Having her feel that she had to get assisted, I can't forget how she could, she had a hard time getting up, sitting down. And watching the caregivers do that too bothered me, because I wasn't used to seeing my mother in that way. She was an independent, healthy woman. So for me to make Japanese food for her was an act of love. Like I wanted her to feel like this was comfort food for her, that this is familiar to her, it tasted good, and it was something that she was going to look forward to. And when she saw it and smelled it and tasted it, there was a enjoyment in the situation where she was. As vulnerable as she was, as dependent as she felt, as an imposition that she thought she was being, to see something brought to her in the form of a meal that really delighted her and made her feel happy was really important to me. Okay, so our second meal is what's called a mille fleurs, and it sounds fancy. All it means is layering. You've heard of that in pastry, mille fleurs. Well, this is a layering of nappa cabbage, just cut in half, and it's still connected here at its stem. I'm going to cut this off, and we're going to layer it with paper-thin pork, natural pork. Once again, this is from Nijia. Now, just saying that if you prefer beef to pork, that's perfectly okay. But this is a pretty traditional dish that's made by taking the nappa cabbage leaves and creating layers that we're going to put into this donabe. Now, if you don't happen to have a donabe, a simple pan is perfectly okay. You could layer it in here just as easily. But let's start with our nappa leaves. It's all been washed, and what we do is take one piece of pork, and if it looks like the nappa leaves are a little wide, don't be afraid to generously put a second sheet on top. The whole beauty of this is that it's so thin it cooks very quickly. So you get the idea. We're going to repeat this until we've created a stack. So while we're doing that, let's start our dashi going. We'll go back to putting some water with the kombu. I'm also going to use the katsuobushi. I had some left over when I made miso soup. and about 2 tablespoons of mirin and equal of osake, and ginger tastes so good as part of that pork, so I just let it kind of sit in there a little bit to get the essence in the dashi. We just let it sit and give it a whirl. Layer and layer. Now, this will probably render enough for your loved one to have at least another meal or to share with you. What we do with this now is very simple. We take it, and what you want to do is make sure that you've cut your pieces so they fit into the depth of the donabe. And you create a ring into the donabe pan, or whatever pan you're using. If you want, you can actually, remember the mushrooms that we used for the other dish? You can stick those in here too. Look at how cute this looks. And now we have our dashi that we put together on the side. We're going to pour this all over the top of this nappa. We'll cover this up. So while this is cooking, we want to make a simple ponzu sauce. This looks like an orange, but it is actually a huge Myers lemon. This is the best thing. It makes the most awesome ponzu. I'm going to use both of them because it tends to be, this one is a little bit sweet. So if it's tart, you can control the tartness by the amount of lemon you decide to put in. This thing is really cooking up here, folks, so let's turn this down a little bit. I take a little shoyu, probably about 2 tablespoons, 2-3 tablespoons, and that's it. I will garnish this with some green onion. Put it right in there. You can put hichimi or red pepper flakes right in here. And this is what it looks like. Let's see what our donabe is doing now. Oh yes, look at that. Oh, that looks so delicious. Dinner served. My weekends were always filled with people around my parents' table. So I grew up thinking about food as social. And after my mom recovered and she was able to go back to her own home, we still continued our Sunday dinner. And through this pandemic, through this COVID situation, I think that's the part that really kills me, is that we can't bring her to have dinner with us. And she and my dad used to so enjoy Sunday nights with my kids. And then even after they went off to college, my parents came to my house on Sunday nights. And now with this pandemic, it's just made her isolation to me much more exaggerated and very, very true, you know. You don't want to think of eating as eating for food's sake or, you know, just to nourish your body. It's a social thing. Meals are supposed to be enjoyed. So our third and final dish today is going to be gyudon, or beef bowl. Now, many of you have heard of oyakodon, which is made with chicken and rice and poured over a bowl. We're going to do a similar dish with tender beef. And I've selected actually a shabu cut because I think that it's really helpful to have meat that's not difficult to chew and it's just flavorful. Also, if we don't use the whole thing, we could make shabu shabu with the leftover meat. So let's get started. The beauty of this is it doesn't require a lot of ingredients. I don't cut this end because it keeps the onion together and it's really quick and easy. A neutral oil, canola oil. Take our onion and just let it caramelize. Don't rush the onion. It has a natural sweetness that is going to help you with the seasoning of your sauce. And then let's add the meat. You add just about as much as you think one serving requires. And it's so thin, it will not take long. I'm going to use a slice here. And if the slices are too big, go ahead and break it up with your hand. This is going to taste yummy. Now, as this is cooking, let's get our sauce ready. Just like sukiyaki, as the meat is cooking, we want to actually put sugar right on the meat. I take about a tablespoon for this amount of meat. The onions are cooked, the meat is cooked. Now it's all about the flavoring. Honmirin, a tablespoon. Sake, 2 tablespoons. And you can always adjust the flavor. And shoyu, 2 tablespoons. And let the sauce cook and burn off the alcohol of the sake. At this point, you have to make a decision if you want to put an egg in it or not. And I think we'll do that. Don't let the egg cook too much. The beauty of this dish is that your egg is kind of half done. Like how people dip sukiyaki meat into raw egg. You don't want to have this become a scrambled egg. Ooh, this looks delish. Another really fast dish, right, folks? Now, you know, Japanese people use Tokyo negi, but why not just use regular green onion? We'll prepare our rice. Make it nice and flat so the donburi can go in there. Okay? Here we go. How fast was that for dinner? When my mom looks at some of the foods I've made for her, and she looks at it with so much happiness and joy, and she says, "Oh, you chopped it so fine," or "Oh, what kind of sauce is this?" or "Oh my gosh, this looks so detailed." It makes me realize that she really, that's her way of saying, "Thank you for making this just for me." So I really love that food can make people feel so special. The fact that as a caregiver, you went through the effort to make a dish for them will mean more to them than how it tastes or whether it looks perfect or it's done to perfection. They will be so delighted that you made something for them and it was done with love and served to them. That alone will give them so much pleasure that it's worth going out there and trying. Made a world of your